Any other announcements? All right, I believe Steve Dean is our program today. Looking forward to that. Steve, you want to come up and share your program?
Thank you, Mr. Press.
Go ahead, Brett.
Well, today, I'm talking about the Berlin airlift candy bomb. And it's really a story of hope. And as I was getting ready for this, I got to thinking about it, and it's amazing how what happened in 1948 is so evident in what's happening today in our world. And we've let it happen again. It's amazing. The Yalta Conference in 1945, Churchill, Roosevelt, Stalin got together. It's obvious that the war was almost over and the Germans were in defeat. And so they met in Yalta. And do you know where Yalta is? It's on the coast of Ukraine. That's where they met. And they were going to allow each country to establish their own free government, their own democratic government, through free elections. Well, what happened? You know, all of Eastern Europe, eventually, Russia just took over, basically. And they fostered communist governments in those countries. The city of Berlin in East Germany, Bulgaria, Hungary, Romania, Poland, Czechoslovakia, all those countries were under the iron fist of Russia. And so Russia reneged on what they were going to do. Finally, the Berlin Wall came up, and the Iron Curtain, and it blockaded, and it separated that whole part of the world from the free world. One thing that happened during that period of time, in 1948, the city of Berlin was an island alone in eastern Germany. And Germany had been divided up into sections for Russia, England, America, and France. And so they were all going to administer the country of Germany and bring it back to its pre-war commerce and its pre-war history. So the Americans tried to do that, and the Russians were just the opposite. We were talking at the table. George Patton was right. He was right. He knew that our enemy, our next enemy, was going to be Russia. I mean, it didn't take 2 weeks after the end of World War II, when they were supposedly our allies, they became our enemy. They had a completely different thought process of what a free government should be. And one thing they did, well, the city of Berlin was divided up just like the country of Germany. And so Berlin had Russia, France, America, the UK, and so Russia decided, well, we're going to blockade the city of Berlin, and we're going to starve these people out. We're going to force them to become pro-communist and to accept our way of life, and make them succumb to the Russian rule. Well, the parts of Berlin that were not Russian, the U.S. and the Allies wanted to prevent that from happening. So the way Russia said we're going to do it is we're going to force them to capitulate by blockading the country. We're going to shut down the railroads. We're going to shut down the highways. We're going to close the river ports, stop having any kind of navigational access. We're going to control the utilities. We're going to turn off the electricity. We're going to starve those people into submission. So the Allies said, well, okay, the airways are still free. We still have an air corridor to come into Berlin. So they formed an air bridge to fly supplies into the city of Berlin to sustain the people that were that the Russians were trying to starve out. And at first it was like an impossible task. I mean, you can't fly that much stuff in. I mean, they had to fly coal. They were freezing to death. They had to fly milk, eggs, flour, everything that was required to sustain life in the western part of Berlin. Well, finally, after it got rolling along pretty good, like in the middle part of 1948, it became sustainable. And so the Allies managed to keep that going. Well, along that time, the same period of time, one of the guys that was flying in there, one of the pilots noticed the children that were watching the planes land. So one day he took a day off and flew back into Berlin on his day off and got a Jeep and did a tour of the city. And he discovered all these children and how hungry they were and how they were suffering and how the people of Berlin were suffering and how, he just wanted to reach out to them. He was the ultimate, Colonel Halvorsen, Gail Halvorsen, the ultimate service above self. He was a Rotarian, if you want to call it that, in Berlin at that time. So he decided, he met these children and he interacted with them. And he realized that, they were just talking, but they just wanted hope and they wanted freedom. They didn't ask for anything. Most of the time when you go around foreign children as a military person, they beg for candy or whatever. You can't run them away. You've had the same thing happen to you when you go to foreign countries. You go to Mexico. Well, these kids didn't ask for anything for themselves. They just wanted hope. They wanted freedom. But he realized that as he would start to turn to walk away, he reached his pocket. He had 2 pieces of government chewing gum. He walked back over there and he broke it into 4 pieces, the 2 sticks, and handed them to 4 children. They unwrapped it, and they actually tore the wrapping paper and passed that around so the kids could smell the sweet. And they passed the gum around, and they loved it. And he was so taken by that. He said, look, kids, I will bring you all some candy. I will drop it from my airplane. And they said, well, how will we know it's you? And he said, well, I'll tell you what, when I come in the airport, when I'm landing at Temple Hall, I'll rock my wings. And you'll know it's me. And so he came in, and he saw the kids down there, and he rocked his wings, and he had the crew chief drop the candy. The planes had a canister or a chute where they would drop flares. And so he dropped it out that chute. And so the kids got that candy. So he did it again. And they got it. And he did it again. And they got it. But then he became fearful that I may get in trouble because I don't have permission to do this. And, well, it turned out that the 3rd drop, one of the parachutes that the candy was attached to hit a newspaper reporter. And so he put the story in the newspaper. Well, so the newspaper was read by the boss of the European commander. And so he called the group commander where the airplane was flying. So Colonel Halvorsen, at that time a lieutenant, was called in. And he said, oh no, I've been called. I'm going to get in bad trouble here. He went in, and so Colonel Tunner asked him, he says, what's going on? And he told him, he said, he knew he was going to be in bad trouble. He said, well, I think it's the greatest thing I've ever heard of. And he said, oh, I wish that you'd have told me about it first. But, so anyhow, he was encouraged. And so it finally became a huge humanitarian effort for them to drop that candy to those children. And the story goes from the some of the history of the Berlin blockade and the airlift that fact that the American people were reaching out with compassion to the German people in Berlin, that made them have a better feeling toward the Americans and the Allies than they had toward the Russians. And it helped us win the battle over there. So, like I say, Colonel Halvorsen was, those kids, they called him the Candy Bomber, Uncle Chocolate, the Chocolate Bomber. He would get candy and attach it to a little parachute and drop it, and the kids would get it. And some of them had not had any candy since the war started. I mean, when it started in around 1940 in Germany, and so they were so thankful. And all of a sudden, they started getting letters at the base saying how much they appreciated this candy. And they finally had to hire 2 secretaries at Tempelhof just to take care of the mail, the thank you letters that they were getting for this candy. This one humanitarian effort. They even invited Colonel Halvorsen to come back to the States and make a tour and talk to the people about what was going on. And Hershey's and all the different candy companies started shipping candy over there. And not only would they drop the candy, but they would take it and go to the hospitals and go to the children, reach out to the different events. They had an open house at the base and brought the kids in. So it turned out to be a really wonderful, wonderful event. So what we do, back in about 2007, Mary Jane, my daughter, was teaching over in school, and so she said, "Daddy, why don't we recreate that candy bomb story?" And so I said, "Okay, we'll do that." And so through the museum, we put together a program, and we gave a classroom lecture to the teachers so they could teach it beforehand, and the kids would be prepared. And then on the given day, they would come out outside the building, and the candy drop would occur. We'd drop the candy from an airplane, and then the kids would just go wild, get the candy. It was so funny. It was so great. And so we continue doing that as part of the museum program. And now we do it for the 5th graders. So next Wednesday, we're going to do that for the 5th graders. We invite people that have airplanes out of the airport to bring their plane and put it on the flight line so they can show. We ask the police, the sheriff, fire, the EMS, the helicopter for the ambulance and all that to come put their stuff in display. Let the kids get out there and touch it and see it. And then at one point of the program, we let one of the pilots take one of the teachers. And so we put all of the 5th grade teachers in an airplane, if they want to go, and they take off and do a kind of a flying aerial parade around the airport. And the kids can watch those planes fly. And then when they land, they come taxiing up and go right back to the flight line where they were. And the kids are all over here watching. And so I get out there and say, okay, let's give that teacher a big hip hooray when they get it. So the plane lands, stops, the teacher gets out, and those kids just scream, hip hip hooray for the teacher. And you know, one of the things about that, going aside from the candy bomber himself, you don't realize how you're going to affect children when you do things like that. And this one little kid came up to me and said, Mr. Dean, he said, I got to get in an airplane and feel of it and be a part of it. I've never been in an airplane. I got to watch it take off. And then I saw it fly over. And then it landed and it taxied, and I got to touch it. He actually saw an airplane fly over that he got to touch. And he was just smitten by that. So it was just so great to reach out to those kids and in a way that they would never be affected. So it's so much fun to do that. And so we use these bags. I don't have parachutes. And we don't have a big military transport, so we use some of the helicopter guys out there, and we take these bags of candy. I've got 12 pieces of chocolate, like those miniature Three Musketeers and Snickers and things like that in here, and we put them in a big laundry basket, and we just dump the whole thing out, and the candy goes everywhere, and the kids just love it, you know. And so I have the ROTC kids out there to help the American Legion veterans, and like I say, all these volunteers that have their airplanes out there, and we just have a big time. But it's, you know, going back to the blockade, it seems like we don't learn the lesson. I mean, like, you know, we had the same situation in 1948, and now we've got it right over there today in the Ukraine. I don't know what the answer is, but we just don't get it. We just don't get our leaders. We just don't get it, you know. And I don't know what about Putin. I don't understand that guy at all. You know, he is the devil incarnate. And so, you know, I just hope and pray that our country can support those kids. And you know, I'm going to let Pete come up here just for a second. I'm going to try to keep this slam. We'll try to get through. But so here's our candy, and these are little bags of candy here for anyone that would like to be a sponsor of our program. And so I'm asking our sponsors to make a $250 donation to the museum. And so if anybody would like to do that, just grab your bag of candy and I'll send you a donation form. But you know, when the Iron Curtain, everybody remembers that, and you remember, you know, President Reagan said, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down that wall." Well, one of our kids was a Rotary exchange student in Germany at that time. Pete, come up here and tell us a little bit about Stacy.
Stacy went to Germany in 86, 87 as an exchange student and came back. And then went to SMU and wanted to go on a foreign exchange or foreign semester or whatever they call it. But SMU didn't do that, so the University of Illinois did. And she went through that program and went to Austria for one semester. It turns out that was in 1991. If my dates are right. And while she was there, the Berlin Wall came down. But backtrack, when she was an exchange student in northern Germany, many families in the west of Germany had relatives in the east of Germany, and they communicated with letters, and they sent goodie packages to them back and forth. They would allow that, but you couldn't cross the wall. Well, one of the families had become very close to this family in East Germany, had a son named Robert, and it turns out he was Stacy's age. Actually, I think a year younger. And during her year in Germany, there's a big book fair in East Germany. And all book dealers from everywhere, whether you're west or east or whatever, come into this thing. And one of the Rotarians in her club in Wilhelmshaven, Germany, took Stacy and the other girl that was there to East Germany with them. And one of the families had contacted this other family and said, "Hey, meet them in this certain place at a certain time." Robert is who she met, tells the story, and he said they was scared to death. 16-year-old boy had never seen an American, much less two young American girls. He said he was just scared to death. Well, they met, and while Stacy later on was in Austria, the wall came down. So in the meantime, we had bought her a BMW while she was there. And she went, of course, to the wall and chipped off her block of the wall, and it's in our house. And she drove up to she was going to go get Robert and take him. He'd never been out of East Germany. And they were just going to tour Europe, which they did. But on her way into East Germany, she pulled up to the border there. And of course, they were letting people come in. And the guy came over to her and he said, "You know, lady, turn your fog lights on." She looked around. She just got the car. She looked up and said, "It's a German car. You're a German. You turn them off." She didn't know how to turn them off. But she and Robert put 13,000 miles on that BMW in just a matter of a very few months. And since then, he's since married, got 3 girls. They've all been to our house more than once. And Evelyn, granddaughter, has been to their house and spent time. So there's been a close relationship in that time.
It's amazing how, Rotary in our outreach, in our exchange student program, in our group study exchange has done so much for world peace. And so we just continue to, some of our most favorite exchange teams, were from Germany. Of course, one story I'll tell about that is on New Year's Eve in 2000, in 1999, there was a family next door at Alan Lloyd's house. They had been exchange student parents for German students. So the parents were in Gilmer visiting the students. They were all in my house that night. I said, well, what are y'all going to do? I said, well, how about come out to the museum and I'll show you the museum. And so they said, good idea, good idea. So they all came, the whole family, and they're looking at the displays. Well, there's a display of Richard Potter, former Rotarian. Well, during World War II, he had been a navigator on B-17s flying missions over Germany. And so we're looking at his display case, B-17s, flying over Germany, all the missions that he flew, everything like that. And they're looking at reading the towns and the dates of the places that he had bombed. And they said, and so they finally come down to Eastbottom. And they said, Eastbottom, that's our hometown. And then they looked at the date, like February the 23rd, whatever, 1944. That's the day our house was built. That's the day our house was bombed. I said, well, there's your Gilmer connection right there. I said, well, oh, don't worry. I said, we were not injured. They said, Grandma and Grandpa were in the cellar, and Mom and Dad went to the bunker. And when they all came out, the house was gone. But don't worry, we rebuilt it. So that was our Rotary connection. Another Rotary connection, when we had a team here, of course, over at Watson was married at that particular time. And instead of rolling out the green carpet and giving them the key to the city, O'Rear wouldn't talk to them because he had been a POW in during World War II. So there are these mixed feelings that are hard to overcome. But you have to work at it, but it happens. And I'll tell you this, the candy bomber, Colonel Halvorsen, passed away in February. And one of the things that he said about working with those kids in East Berlin, in West Berlin, he said, he recalled that a Berlin child told him that the candy was not just chocolate, it was hope. It was hope for those kids. One other quick story, and then I'll close. 3 years ago, we had the fifth graders out there, and Elliot's grandson, John Henry, was in fifth grade. And just like I asked Pete extemporaneously to come talk today, because I remember Stacy, John Henry's grandparents were these children in Berlin. Matthew was born and raised in Berlin, and his parents, these were his parents right here. So I had John Henry come out, and so it was a connection there between those kids and his dad and John Henry. It was amazing. It's a small world. So I'm going to close with this little video, and then and I appreciate your letting me talk. That's Colonel Halvorsen, at age about 100.
A piece of post-World War II II history was reenacted at a Texas school today, the Berlin area.
And I'm illiterate as far as these countries, so. But it's taking time to download. Wow, that must be so good. Bear with me for a minute. Maybe it'll load it up.
A piece of post-World War II history was reenacted at a
It's buffering.
You know how to make it fun.
You can't leave it alone. You should catch up. There you'll catch up. Yeah.
While he's doing that, does anybody want to volunteer to be at the booth Thursday night? Other than Pete, who's so gracious. No? I'm shocked.
Steve, if you would, just kind of briefly.
If it runs okay, but thank you for letting me come and talk. I appreciate it. And if you want to come out and watch the event a week from today, tomorrow it'll be at 9 o'clock. I expect to have 180 fifth graders from Gilmer and maybe some fifth graders from Hawkins as well. And we've got a lot of volunteers. I've got about 40 volunteers lined up to help out. So it'll be a great day for the kids. And so we're looking forward to it. Thank you for letting me.
Steve, thank you for bringing us that interest in the program. And Steve is right, we should never let our history die. So let's stand around this knowledge of what happened in the past and not let our kids